the next folder that I want to talk about is the program data folder. So the program data folder, as you can see, that folder is dimmed in color, so that tells me that it is a hidden folder. It is used for application data that is not user specific. Okay, so when you install a program, an application, I'll use virus detection software as an example because I think it's a good example for this. In that, when you install virus protection on your computer, it downloads virus definition files. Those definition files, if I have 10 different people using this computer, I certainly do not need those definition files stored in 10 different locations, do I? Okay? Instead, I can have them stored in one location. And that is what I refer to as the program data that is for all users. It's not user specific. Okay? If I install a program that I have settings for that are very specific to my user account, then that would be program data that is user specific. Okay, so the program data that is not user specific, which means that is used by all users that use this computer, are stored in the program data folder. Okay, there is a so it is hidden. You can see the path to the folder is C:\program data, no space between the word program and the word data. There are variables that, notice I used the plural there, there are actually variables that can be used to reference that folder, and there are two. One of the variables name is in fact program data, so again if I type set P, you can see down here program data. Okay, so the variable's name is actually program data. That I would have to say is probably the modern name, the newer name for the variable. Earlier versions of Windows did not, XP, specifically XP and below, did not have a program data folder, but they did have a folder that was used for all, that was not user specific data, so data that was stored and used for all users on that computer, and that folder's name was called all users. Okay, it's not called all users anymore, it's called program data. But the variable all users profile still exists. Okay, so there are actually two variables that reference the C:\program data folder. Okay, the first one is in fact program data, you can see it up here. And it points, again, the value is C:\program data, and the second one is all users profile. And again, and that probably is to provide, the old naming convention and to provide some backward compatibility with older versions of Windows. Okay, but there are two. If you are, one of the advantages to using a variable as well is if I don't have program, I don't have hidden files displayed, but I want to open the program data folder, I can actually just type the variable's name, %program data % in the search box. Okay, notice it will actually open the program data folder. It does not display hidden files. Okay, so if I go back up a folder here, you can see program data is not visible. So I can't navigate into it, but that doesn't mean I can't open it. Okay, just because I can't see it doesn't mean I can't open it. Okay, I can open it by typing the variable name there. I could also just type the folder name here, program data. Okay, and that would also open that folder. So my point is, if you know the path to the folder, or you know the environment variable name for that folder, and it's a hidden folder, but you don't want to display hidden files or folders, you can still access that without actually having to display hidden files or folders. Okay, questions on program data? The next folder then is Windows. So your Windows directory is contains your Windows operating system. Okay, this is kind of a very important folder, guys. You don't want to be deleting it or renaming it or deleting stuff from it. It contains the files that contain the code to run the operating system. There are a bunch of folders within this folder. And I'll go over just one of them actually. Just one of them. I'll be looking at the System32 directory. But Windows does also have two variables that can be, so C:\Windows. And again, one of them is called Winder, and the other one is called system root. So again, if I type set W to show you all the variables that start with the letter W, there's only one, and you can see that that variable %winder % points to C:\Windows, and the other one was system root. So if I do set S to show all variables that have a name that begin with the letter S, you can see the system root a variable has that same path, C:\Windows. Okay. So the System32 directory then is the next folder in the path. There is no variable for this. It is not hidden. It is, however, an important folder. It contains folders and files. There are a bunch of files in this location as well. The types of files that you'll find here are DLL files, so you'll notice the extensions on these files are DLL. So these are .dll files, are files that have a DLL extension. These are library files that are used by programs. Different programs may need the same code to, say, start up. Therefore, these dynamic link libraries are actually used by multiple programs. Once again, the whole purpose behind creating dynamic link libraries was to eliminate repetitive code. So if I had 10 programs that need the same code to load up to get loaded, then I would have to have 10 separate files to do that. So dynamic link libraries were created to sort of create these modules that are used by many programs. Very critical files, DLL files, again, not something that you would want to be deleting. The other type of files that you'll find here are .exe files. So again, if I scroll down far enough, I probably will find some DLL files, lots of DLL files. Okay, so you're not actually task list, task kill, task manager. These are all executable files. The extensions are not displayed, but their extensions are actually, I'm going to check off file name extensions here, and you can see that they are .exe files. Okay, so again, much like your hidden button up here allows you to actually display extensions of files, you can also check off the file name extensions to actually see that extension. We're going to talk about what file extensions are in a few, but the extension defines the file's type. .exe is an extension that defines an executable file. Okay, so a program file that is launched when you run WinWord. Okay, Microsoft Word, the physical file name on disk is called WinWord, and it has an extension of .exe. Okay, so your executable files that exist in the System32 directory are your Windows executable files. When we start, eventually we will get there, when we start executing commands at the command prompt, this is where the external commands will be found. So they are physical files stored on disk that have a particular purpose. If I start deleting these files, then they're a task that I will not be able to perform on my system. So System32 is contains your dynamic link library files, your executable program files, and some of those executable program files are actually command line programs. On a 64-bit computer, this is, in my opinion, the naming convention that's used here is counterintuitive. But I don't create these names, so just bear with me here. Okay, on a 64-bit computer, all of the 64-bit libraries and executables are stored in the System32 directory. Okay, so this is a 64-bit system. On a 64-bit system, all of those DLLs and EXEs are in that directory are 64-bit applications. Okay, on a 32-bit system, your 32-bit DLLs and EXEs are stored in that System32 directory. Okay, much like your program files, if you have 32-bit DLLs and 32-bit executables on a 64-bit system, they are not stored in the System32 directory. They are stored in the syswow64 directory. Do not ask me where this name comes from because I have no clue. Okay, but syswow64. So that's why I kind of look at this as counterintuitive, because the 64-bit programs are stored in the system32 directory. The 32-bit programs are stored in the syswow64 directory. Okay, so again, that's the purpose of syswow64. Okay, if you have a syswow64 directory, then that means that you have a 64-bit system. Okay, because you would not have that directory on a 32-bit system, because all of your 32-bit dynamic link libraries and executables are stored in that system32 directory. Okay? Questions? Also within the Windows directory, there is a directory called, where is it? WinSX. WinSXS. Okay? This is officially called the Windows Component Store. This folder stores files that are used to support the functions needed to customize and update Windows. When Windows installs updates, it stores the new Windows components in this folder. It also stores the old Windows components in this folder. It will keep the old Windows components in this folder until you clean them out, which means the more updates you do, the larger that folder will become, the more disk space it will use. When we look at disk cleanup utilities later in the semester, we'll look at ways to clean up that folder. Okay, last semester when I covered it in class, I said, let me take a look at my computer in my office to see how much space. I think I cleaned up like 12 gig of space on my system because of all of the updates. And you don't want to necessarily, if you've just updated the system, you don't necessarily want to clean that out just yet. Okay, because if you clean that out, then you can't revert to a previous update. Okay, you can't undo an update. And as I said before, Windows updates sometimes cause problems. And if they cause a problem, then usually one of the first things you want to do is revert back to the previous system without the update, and you can't do that if those components were not saved, okay, to the system. Okay, so that's your WinSX folder. And that's the only things I'm going to look at in the Windows directory. The next folder that I want to look at is the users directory. So the users directory contains one subfolder for each user that has logged onto this system. So when I double click on users, you can see a bunch of names here, my name included, jruta44, my logon name. So it contains one subfolder for each user that has logged in on this computer. Don't confuse these folders. These are not accounts. Okay, do not confuse these folders with accounts that exist on this computer. There are only 2 accounts that exist on this computer, but there are many profiles that exist on this computer. Okay, when I'm logging on to this computer, I'm not using an account that exists on this computer. I'm using an account that exists on the college's server. Okay, so that account is totally different. I could have an account on this system and never log in. And if I never log in, then I'm not going to have a profile folder. So the profile folder is a folder that gets created on the computer the first time you log in. The very, very first time that you log into the system. Okay, if you log into this computer for the first time, it will, and your username is jsmith22, it would create a folder called jsmith22, and it would populate that folder with the contents of a hidden folder. So I'm going to uncheck this. I'm going to check off this hidden and point out this folder called default. If I double click on that, you can see that kind of looks like most users' profile folders. So when I log into this computer for the first time as jsmith22, it creates a folder called jsmith22 in the c:\users directory, and it populates that, or in essence it copies the contents of this default directory into that new users folder, jsmith22. Okay? From that point on, when jsmith logs in, any changes that he makes will be stored in his profile folder. He changes his desktop background, he changes his default browser, he changes the home page on the browser, he changes the default font within his Microsoft Word program, he changes the background on his desktop. All of that information is going to be stored within his profile folder. Okay, the next time he logs in, that profile folder is going to be loaded, which is why whenever you log into a computer more than once, whatever you did in your personal area on that computer is, depending on where you're at, is going to be reloaded. Okay, so I log into this computer, I make a bunch of changes to this computer, it changes the files in my profile folder. I log into this computer again another day, I should see those changes. Okay, now here at BCC, that is not the case. Okay, here at BCC, because of deep freeze, which I think I've mentioned to you guys. Did I mention deep freeze in this class? I did not. Okay, deep freeze is a program that we use here on campus. What we do is on the real machines anyway, because we have a lot of virtual machines, we're moving really towards that, more towards that environment, but this is a real machine, it's not a virtual machine. And all of our real machines, what they do is they install the operating system, they install all the programs that are going to be needed on the system, they configure the system with all of the default settings that they want all users to have, and then they run this program called Deep Freeze that freezes the system in that state. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that when I start this computer, I can do whatever I want on this computer. Right now, I could delete that Windows directory. It would take me a few steps to do, but I could, and the next time I reboot the machine, it would be right back. Okay, so if I install anything, the next time I reboot the machine, it's not going to be there. Okay, the only drive that I can make changes to, that those changes will come back, is drive T. Okay, on this PC, you'll actually see that it's named, God, I wish I didn't need glasses. You can see it's called Thaw Space. Okay, so deep freeze, thaw space, it's the only drive that's not frozen. So anything I save on drive T, the next time I reboot this machine, that will still be there. But if I store something in my documents folder that today, it's not going to be there tomorrow, unless the machine is not frozen, and it is frozen. Okay, so again, when you guys log in to the computers downstairs, even if you have a class, let's say in K101, and you sit at the same computer all the time, okay, you log into that computer, it's creating that profile for you. Okay, tomorrow, it's creating that profile for you. Next week, it's creating that. Every time you log in, it's creating that profile for you, which is why it takes so long to log into the computers downstairs, because every time you log in, it's creating a profile for you. Okay, so if it's a real machine and nobody reboots that machine, so let's say you have a class in there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you have another class in there at 11 o'clock in the morning, and between the time that you logged in at 8 o'clock and your 11 o'clock, nobody's restarted that computer, then the login process for you is going to be a lot faster, because your profile will still be stored on that computer. Concept okay? Okay, so again, on home computers, I'm guessing you don't have your machines frozen. Okay, so when you log into a computer for the first time, you will, that C:users folder, the user's login name is the name that is used for the folder name. Okay, and that becomes your profile folder. So in essence, it's a set of data that is used to recreate your environment every time you log in. So I want to make sure that, my desktop looks the same. What I typically do, to be honest with you guys, is at the beginning I have the special password to unfreeze this machine. So when I go into a room that I've never taught in before, I always try to get in before the semester starts, and I unfreeze the machine. I log in and I set up my desktop the way that I want it. And then I refreeze the machine, so that when I come in at the beginning of the semester, my profile's already there, all of my start menu and all of these tools that I have up here are already there for me. Everything that I use on a regular basis is already there. Okay, so user's profile, that user's directory and its purpose. There is a variable for that, and again, if I do set you can see there's a variable here called user profile. Okay, and notice C:\users\J_root of 44. Okay, if one of you logged in and your login name was, I'll use jsmith22 again, your user profile variable would have a value of C:\users_jsmith22. Okay, so every user in this particular situation would have a variable name different than any other user. Same thing with username. Notice that there is a variable called username, okay, and it references my user's logon name. Again, scripting down the road, powerful thing to remember. Okay, I want to make sure that when I log in, that when I log in or when anybody logs in, that something happens in their profile folder. I know that percent user profile percent is always going to point to the user's profile folder. I don't care where it is. I don't care what its name is. I don't care whether it's on C, drive D, drive E. I don't care whether your username doesn't match your profile name, because that can happen under certain situations. The variable is always going to point to the correct location. Okay? Questions on, well, actually the contents of that folder. So if I double click here, folders that you all must already be, I'm assuming that most of you are already familiar with, like documents and videos and music and pictures. So you can see that each of these folders is unique to me under J. Aruda, whereas if somebody else logs in, they're going to have their own personal folders. Documents is typically where you store your personal files. Your programs like Microsoft Word and Excel will automatically, if you save a file, will automatically assume that that's where you want to save it, unless somebody's changed the settings on that system. But for the most part, that's where those personal folders are stored. Same thing with your desktop. So you have a desktop folder, again, that's showing you the shortcuts that I might have exist on my desktop. Okay? I'm not going to go there just yet. Okay. So also under your personal profile folder, notice here there are some hidden folders. You can see if I check this off that some of the stuff disappear. If I check it off, I should say, if I uncheck it, some stuff disappears. If I check it off, you can see app data is the one I want to talk about. Okay, so earlier I said that your program data folder stored data that was not user specific. This folder stores data that is user specific. So you have your own personal app data folder. I have my personal app data folder. There are folders within here. One of them is called roaming. I'm going to just focus on roaming and local for now. The roaming folder contains data. Let's say that I work here at BCC, and let's say there are 5 computers sitting in front of me, and I log in to each of the 5 computers. Okay, I have a profile on every one of those computers, right? Okay, I log in, I have a profile on that computer. I change my desktop, I change my default browser, I add a shortcut to my start menu. I do that on the first computer. Okay, when I log into the second computer, I'm not going to see those settings that I configured on the first computer. That concept okay, guys? The profile is local to that computer only. In a domain environment, you can configure something called roaming profiles. Okay, I want to make sure that when I log into computer A and I make changes to my profile, that when I log into computer B, I'm seeing those changes. Okay, without going into any more depth of an explanation, that's called a roaming profile. Okay, certain things, anything that's part of a roaming profile would be in the roaming folder. Okay, things that would not, by nature of their size, for example, roam, because when you're roaming, it's copying it up to a server and then copying it back down to a computer. Okay, so that's going to take up, time that it takes. So by their nature, there are certain files that would not automatically roam, and those would actually be stored in the local folder. Okay, but all of your user-specific data files, and I'm not talking about the files that you create, the files that you create with your word processor or whatever. Those you're probably going to find either on a separate drive altogether or in your documents folder. Okay, here I'm talking about program data. Okay, not user data that you created, but program data that's used by the programs that you're using. Okay, so again, that is hidden. And it also has a variable. The variable's name is app data. So again, if I type set A, you can see app data, and you can see the absolute path, C:\users /J root of 44 /app data /roaming is the actual folder that that variable points to. Okay? The next folder that I want to talk about is also in the users directory, and it is, I actually already mentioned this, but I'm just going to point it out again, is public. And in public, you'll see that there are actually some hidden things in public. I'm going to uncheck that to show those folders that are primarily the ones you might be using. Documents, downloads, music, pictures, and videos. Again, as I noted earlier, if you put a file in this location, that means anybody who uses this computer has access to it. It's not going to be part of your library, so it's not going to be something that they're going to easily see, like when they click, if I put a file in Documents, and I click on Documents over here, I'm not going to see that file. I would have to navigate out to this folder to actually see it, or add it to my libraries, which we don't necessarily get into in this class, but you could. But my point is, remember, in Windows 7, if I put a file here, by default, it's going to show up in the user's libraries. Okay, so Microsoft still has this public documents area, and you can still store files here that you want any user on the system to have access to. But keep that in mind, guys, that any file you put there, anybody that uses this computer has access to it. And I don't mean just being able to read, I mean being able to read it, being able to modify it, being able to delete it. Okay, so once you put it in that public folder, you kind of lose control over what anybody can do with that file or folder. Okay, so that's what public is for. You'll notice again there's public documents, public downloads, public music, public pictures, public videos, and so on. Okay. I've already talked about the default folder. Again, it is hidden by default. It is hidden, and its name is in fact default. And remember that folder is I refer to it as a template folder. Okay, when I log into this computer for the first time, it takes the content of this folder, the default folder, and it copies it to the newly created profile folder. So I'm logging in as a new user called user1. It creates a folder called user1, takes the contents of the default folder, and copies it to that user1 folder. And from that point on, that user's profile is personal to them. Question?
So if you wanted to change like what your default user folder to look like, you could change, you could like edit the default folder and then new ones and create that.
You can, like, you can put stuff in here. So, you know, I could come out here and add something to the documents folder, and then it would be in everybody's documents folder when they logged in. You used to be able to very easily copy a profile, like if I had, you know, gee, I really like the way Jay Aruda has her profiles, you know, her desktop, the stop menu. You used to be able to easily copy one user's profile to another user's profile. That kind of went away with Windows 7. Now you got to do it through a sysprep utility that is more complicated than, you know, I do cover it in a server administration class. But something like just putting a file in a location or putting a folder, if you put a folder in default, it will only affect a user's profile who has not yet been created. Okay, so if I add a folder to that default location, if I added something here under documents, then anybody that logged into this computer for the first time would have that file in their documents folder. But it would be their own copy of the file. Okay, it wouldn't be the same, you know, 10 people would have 10 different copies of that same one file. But setting up something like a printer, a network drive, those types of things would not be easily done from within File Manager. Okay, questions then on these default files and directories? Questions? Okay.